The neon hum of Greenwich Village died at the threshold of Silas's curiosities. Elias had lived in New York for a decade, but he'd never seen this shop. It was tucked between two brownstones, like a dark tooth in a crowded mouth. Inside, the air tasted of cedar and copper. "It's a rare piece," the shopkeeper whispered, his eyes like cloudy marbles. He gestured to a towering wardrobe of blackened oak. "The wood remembers things. It doesn't just hold clothes, it holds space." Elias, captivated by the intricate carvings of weeping vines, paid in cash. By 10 p.m., the movers, cursing the inexplicable weight of the thing, had settled it into the corner of his bedroom. By midnight, Elias was alone, and the city outside felt miles away. The first sound was a dry, rhythmic rasp. Elias sat up in bed, his breath hitching. It sounded like a fingernail dragging across a chalkboard, muffled by thick wood. Click-clack, click-clack. "Old apartments settle," he muttered to the shadows. Then came the knocking, 3 distinct soft raps from the center of the wardrobe doors. Thump, thump, thump. It wasn't the sound of wood expanding. It was the sound of a knuckle meeting a surface. Elias swung his legs out of bed, his feet hitting the cold hardwood. He approached the wardrobe, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He grabbed the iron handles and flung the doors wide. Empty. The scent of stale incense and old dust wafted out. His winter coats hung limp on their hangers, swaying slightly from the sudden draft. He ran his hand along the back panel. Solid wood. No hidden compartments, no rats, no logic. He slammed the door shut and crawled back into bed, leaving the bedside lamp burning. He was drifting into a fitful sleep when the whispers began. It wasn't a voice he could understand, but a wet, sibilant masking of air. Shh, shh. It sounded like 1,000 dead leaves skittering across a tombstone. Elias looked up. The lamp was flickering. In the dim light, he saw the left door of the wardrobe groan. It didn't just swing, it drifted open with an agonizing slowness, as if something on the other side was carefully gauging his reaction. He didn't move. He couldn't. He watched as the right door followed suit. The interior of the wardrobe was no longer just a closet. Despite the lamp's glow hitting the oak, the darkness inside was absolute. It didn't behave like a shadow. It behaved like ink. It was a void that seemed to have a physical weight, a depth that stretched far beyond the 3-foot dimensions of the furniture. "Who's there?" Elias's voice cracked. The shadows within the wardrobe shifted. They began to pull away from the back panel, piling up at the threshold like a rising tide. Elias realized with a jolt of pure primal electricity that the coats weren't there anymore. There was only the empty, and the empty was moving. He lunged for his phone on the nightstand, but his eyes stayed locked on the wardrobe. He expected a hand to reach out. He expected a monster to crawl onto his rug. Instead, the darkness began to fold. In the center of that impossible blackness, 2 points of light didn't appear. They uncovered. 2 wet, glistening orbs positioned exactly where a face should be, pulsed with a faint, sickly amber glow. Elias froze, his hand inches from his phone. He realized then that the wardrobe wasn't a container, it wasn't a doorway. The carvings on the outside, the weeping vines he'd admired, weren't decorations. They were veins. The wood wasn't blackened by age, it was bruised. As the wardrobe tilted forward almost imperceptibly, Elias saw the back of the wardrobe blink. The entire interior was a single, massive, lidless eye, and the pupils, the 2 amber spots, contracted as they focused on him. The wardrobe wasn't a feature, it was a socket, and it had finally found something worth looking at. The Miller family lived in a renovated brownstone in Park Slope, a place filled with sunlight, high ceilings, and the persistent hum of a coddler's laughter. When Sarah found the blackened oak wardrobe at a dusty shop in the village, she thought it was the perfect anchor piece for their master bedroom. "It's heavier than it looks," her husband, Mark, had grunted as they heaved it against the far wall. The wood felt unnaturally cold, even through his work gloves, and the carvings of weeping vines seemed to shiver under the touch of the hallway light. The first night, the wardrobe was a silent sentinel. The second night, it began to rearrange. Sarah woke up at 3 a.m. to a sound like silk sliding over sandpaper. Shwip, shwip. She sat up, squinting through the gloom. The wardrobe doors were shut tight, but the vibration coming from within was unmistakable. "Mark," she whispered, shaking his shoulder. He groaned, blinking awake. "What, is it Toby?" "Listen." From behind the heavy oak panels came the muffled sound of hangers clinking, not the random swaying of a draft, but a methodical, rhythmic shifting. Mark climbed out of bed and crossed the room. He yanked the doors open, expecting to find a stray cat or perhaps a shelf that had given way. Instead, he found order. The evening before, Sarah had haphazardly tossed her sweaters on the bottom shelf. Now, they were folded with a precision that bordered on the obsessive, stacked by color gradient from cream to charcoal. Mark's suits, previously bunched at the end of the rail, were spaced exactly 2 inches apart. "Did you do this?" Mark asked, his voice low. "I haven't left the bed," Sarah replied, her voice trembling. The next night, the wardrobe stopped organizing and started consuming. Mark realized his favorite leather watch was missing from the top of the dresser. An hour later, Sarah couldn't find her wedding ring, which she'd placed on the wardrobe's built-in valet hook. They emptied the cabinet, pulling out every coat and shoe, but the items were gone. The back of the wardrobe was solid, scarred wood. There were no cracks, no holes, just the faint, lingering scent of ozone and ancient cedar. "I want it out of the house," Sarah said, standing by the window. "There's something wrong with the space around it." She was right. The bedroom felt tilted. When they stood near the wardrobe, the sounds of Brooklyn, the distant sirens, and the rumble of the Q train seemed to drop away into a pressurized silence. At midnight, the movement returned. This wasn't the sound of clothes. It was the sound of footsteps. Heavy, barefoot thuds echoed from behind the wood, followed by a wet, dragging noise. Thump, drag, thump, drag. Mark grabbed a heavy brass floor lamp, his knuckles white. "Whoever is in there, get out!" The knocking started then, not from the doors, but from the bottom. It sounded as if someone were trapped beneath the floorboards of the wardrobe, pleading to be let up. Mark lunged forward and gripped the iron handles. He felt a strange resistance, as if the air itself was trying to keep the doors sealed. With a primal shout, he threw his weight backward. The doors shrieked open. The couple froze. The back of the wardrobe, the solid oak panel they had touched just hours before, was gone. In its place was a void. It wasn't a dark closet. It was a corridor. A long, narrow hallway stretched out from the frame of the furniture, extending far beyond the physical wall of their house. The walls of this interior space were made of the same bruised, blackened wood, but they were damp, glistening with a thin film of something that looked like oil. Far down the hallway, perhaps 50 feet into the impossible distance, a single, flickering bulb hung from a frayed wire.
Underneath the light, Sarah's wedding ring and Mark's watch lay neatly placed on a small wooden pedestal. Then, from the darkness just beyond the reach of that distant bulb, the footsteps started again, fast, wet. Something was running towards them from deep inside the house's new throat, and as it drew closer, Mark realized the hallway wasn't made of wood at all. The vines on the walls were pulsing. The wardrobe hadn't just opened a door, it had opened its mouth.
The Upper West Side apartment was a cathedral of glass and steel, a stark contrast to the blackened oak wardrobe that now sat in the corner of Julian's study. Julian, a freelance architect who appreciated the brutal character of the piece, had ignored the shopkeeper's warning that the wood was hungry for history. To Julian, it was just a centerpiece, a heavy, silent anchor for a room that felt too airy. His daughter, Mia, was the first to notice the change. It started on a Tuesday, during that gray hour when the city sunset bleeds into a dirty purple. "Dad, why is Grandma in the study?" Julian looked up from his blueprints, his brow furrowed. "Grandma's in Florida, honey, you know that." "But she called me," Mia whispered, pointing a trembling finger toward the wardrobe. "She said she found my lost locket. She said it's in the back, behind the winter coats." Julian felt a cold prickle at the base of his spine. His mother had been dead for 3 years. He walked Mia back to her room, citing apartment echoes and overactive imaginations. But that night, he didn't sleep. He sat in the living room, the door to the study left ajar. At 2:14 a.m., the voice arrived. It wasn't a ghostly moan or a cinematic shriek. It was a perfect, crystalline recreation of his wife's voice, Sarah, who was currently asleep in the bedroom down the hall. "Julian, can you help me with the latch? It's stuck." The voice came from the study. It had that specific melodic lilt Sarah had when she was tired. Julian stood up, his heart thudding against his ribs like a trapped bird. He stepped into the study. The wardrobe sat in the shadows, its dark wood appearing to absorb what little light spilled from the street lamps outside. The left door was cracked open, just an inch. A sliver of absolute velvet blackness peered out. "Julian, please," the voice said again, warmer this time, more intimate. "I found that bottle of wine we saved for the anniversary. It's right here in the corner. Come see." "Sarah is in bed," Julian said, his voice a dry rasp. The wardrobe creaked. The door opened another inch. "Is she?" The voice changed. It shifted mid-sentence, the tone dropping an octave, becoming the gravelly, comforting baritone of Julian's father. "Don't be a coward, Jules. It's just wood and hinges. Come get the watch I promised you. It's right here. Just reach in." Julian approached the wardrobe, drawn by a sickeningly sweet scent, like rotting lilies and expensive cedar. The psychological weight of the voices was a physical pressure in the room, a gravity that pulled his feet forward. He reached for the handle, his fingers trembling. "There's no one in there," he hissed, as much to himself as to the wood. "Everyone is in here?" the wardrobe whispered, now using a chorus of voices, Mia's giggle, his father's laugh, Sarah's sigh, all harmonizing into a single terrifying chord. "We're all waiting for you to complete the set." Julian grabbed the handles and threw the doors open with a violent jerk. Empty. The hangers were bare. The floor of the wardrobe was polished wood. There was no wine, no watch, no ghost, just the hollow, mocking silence of an antique.
Julian slammed the doors shut and pushed a heavy armchair in front of them. He stayed there until the sun rose over the Hudson, convincing himself it was a waking night terror, a byproduct of stress and city living. The following evening, Julian decided to get rid of it. He couldn't have Mia hearing those voices. He left the apartment to find the shopkeeper, hoping to pay the man to take the cursed thing back. He left the study locked, the chair still jammed against the wardrobe doors. The apartment was silent, empty. In the locked study, the armchair began to slide. It didn't move as if pushed. It moved as if the floor beneath the wardrobe was tilting. The heavy oak doors began to groan, the iron latches straining against the wood until they snapped with the sound of a bone breaking. The doors drifted open, revealing that same impossible ink-black void that ignored the laws of light. From the depths of that darkness, something began to emerge. It wasn't a person. It wasn't the grandma Mia had heard or the father Julian had feared. A hand reached out from the center of the void. It was pale, the skin stretched so thin over the knuckles that it looked like wet parchment. The fingers were unnaturally long, ending in blunt, cracked nails that scraped against the edge of the wardrobe's frame. The hand gripped the wood, its grip so powerful that the ancient oak splintered under its touch. Then a second hand emerged, followed by the slow, sickeningly fluid motion of a shoulder. There was no one in the apartment to see it, no one to hear the wet, heavy thud as the entity pulled itself out of its own reflection. But as the entity stood in the center of the room, it began to change. Its features blurred and shifted, its skin knitting together, and its bones popping into a new configuration. By the time Julian's key turned in the front door lock, the thing in the study looked exactly like Julian. It stood perfectly still, adjusting its grip on a phantom blueprint, its mouth twisting into a practiced smile. The wardrobe doors remained open behind it, waiting for the real Julian to step inside and find his missing family.
The penthouse on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in Tribeca was supposed to be a sanctuary of modern minimalism. When David, a hedge fund manager with a penchant for haunted aesthetics, brought the blackened oak wardrobe from that nameless shop in the village, he thought it added a necessary soul to his sterile home. It took less than an hour for the soul of the apartment to sour. As soon as the movers left, the temperature in the master suite plummeted. It wasn't the crisp chill of an air conditioner. It was the damp, light-swallowing cold of an open grave. David's wife, Elena, walked into the room and stopped mid-step, her breath blooming in a silver mist. "David, look at the shadows," she whispered. The shadows cast by the afternoon sun didn't fall away from the wardrobe. They crawled toward it. The dark silhouettes of the bed and the nightstand stretched like elongated fingers, bleeding into the base of the oak furniture. Every time David turned his back, he felt a gaze, a heavy, predatory focus, staring at the nape of his neck from behind the weeping vine carvings. By nightfall, the wardrobe began to feed. It started with the small things. A crystal vase on the mantelpiece didn't fall. It slid, inch by inch, across the marble until it hovered at the edge and then vanished into the open doors of the wardrobe with a sound like a stone dropping into a deep well. Then went the heavy velvet curtains, sucked toward the oak frame as if caught in a localized gale. "Get it out!" Elena hissed, her eyes wide with primal terror. "David, get it out of this house now!" David grabbed the iron handles to drag it toward the service elevator. He was a fit man, but the wardrobe didn't budge. He called their building manager and 2 security guards. 4 grown men gripped the base, their boots skidding on the hardwood, their faces turning purple with exertion. The wardrobe was rooted. It wasn't just heavy, it felt as if it had grown through the floorboards, through the concrete slab of the skyscraper, and anchored itself into the very bedrock of Manhattan. It was an immovable, blackened tooth in the jaw of the building. Then the doors swung open. A low, rhythmic thrumming began to vibrate through the floor, a sound like a massive heart beating in the basement. The interior of the wardrobe wasn't dark anymore. It was a swirling, hungry gray. "Toby!" Elena's voice went thin and sharp. Their 6-year-old son was standing at the foot of the bed, transfixed. He wasn't crying. He was leaning forward at an impossible angle, his small feet sliding across the floor toward the open oak doors. An invisible tide was pulling him. "Toby, move!" David lunged for his son, but a sudden violent gust of cold air slammed him against the wall. The wardrobe's interior expanded, the shelves dissolved into a throat of jagged, splintered wood. The weeping vines on the exterior began to writhe, extending into the room like tendrils of smoke. One of these shadow vines wrapped around Toby's waist. "Toby!" the boy finally screamed, the spell breaking as he was jerked off his feet. David and Elena both scrambled, grabbing Toby's arms, a horrific tug-of-war between parents and furniture. But the wardrobe was hungry. The air around the opening began to warp, distorting the light like a black hole. With a sound of a wet, snapping branch, the wardrobe inhaled. Toby was gone. He didn't hit the back of the closet. He simply vanished into the gray maw. Elena screamed, a sound of total psychological collapse, and dived in after him. David reached for her trailing hand, but as soon as his fingers brushed the oak, the wardrobe collapsed. It didn't break, it folded. The wood softened like wax, the towering structure shrinking and twisting inward on itself. The floorboards beneath it began to liquefy, turning into a dark, swirling whirlpool of pitch. With a final sickening gulp, the wardrobe sank through the floor, leaving nothing behind but a scorched, rectangular mark on the hardwood, and a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. The next morning, the sun rose over New York City, oblivious to the void on the 42nd floor. In a narrow, forgotten alley in Greenwich Village, the door to Silas's Curiosities creaked open. The shopkeeper, his eyes still like cloudy marbles, hummed a tuneless song as he swept the dust from his stoop. He looked toward the back corner of the shop, where a towering wardrobe of blackened oak sat. It looked refreshed. The wood was polished to a high, oily sheen, and the carvings of weeping vines seemed fuller, more intricate than they had been the day before. The shopkeeper reached out and patted the cold wood. "A long night," he whispered, "but you're back." He walked to the front window and hung a sign on the glass. "Antique wardrobe, rare find, like new." He then sat behind his counter and waited for the bell above the door to ring. He didn't have to wait long. New York was a city of millions, and there was always someone looking for a piece of history to take home.